At approximately 6 p.m. on January 6, 2021, just after a mob of Trump supporters stormed the Capitol, U.S. Capitol Police agents approached two men sitting on the sidewalk just south of the Capitol. One was wearing a Trump 2020 winter cap and a bulletproof vest. He was later identified as Dustin Thompson of Ohio. According to a criminal complaint filed by the Department of Justice, the agents stopped Thompson and his associate when Thompson picked up a coat rack that, quote, appeared to have been taken from inside of the Capitol building, but Thompson fled on foot and got away. Thompson's associate, a man named Robert Lyon, cooperated with law enforcement. He turned over this photo of Thompson posing with the coat rack. And a video from the same day where Thompson recorded himself passing in front of a mirror, seen here in the screen grab, where he reportedly went on to yell, quote, "Woo, America, hey, this is our house." Security footage from the day shows what appears to be Thompson entering the Capitol at 2:48 p.m., not long after the building was first breached. Excuse me for 1 second. You can see him here in that same Trump winter hat before eventually walking into an office on his right. Here he is about 3 minutes later, apparently leaving the office with a bottle of bourbon. Thompson then left the building and returned about 4 minutes later with his associate, the guy who was cooperating, and the two of them headed into that same room before leaving a few minutes later. And then you can see what appears to be Thompson holding that coat rack, a souvenir from the other photo. Thompson was charged with several crimes, including obstruction of an official proceeding and the theft of government property. His associate, Robert Lyon, pled guilty to 2 charges last month. But Dustin Thompson says he is not guilty, despite all but admitting to breaking these laws, because he says he only did what he did because ex-President Donald Trump told him to. Sam Szymanski is the attorney for Dustin Thompson, and he joins me now. Good to have you on the program. I guess I should start with asking for your theory of the case legally here for your client, why he is not guilty if, in fact, he was inside that building in an unauthorized fashion and maybe took a coat rack as a souvenir.
Chris, you've defined it correctly without commenting on the facts of a case in which I'm currently trying. You've hit the nail on the head, right? You've got this president, this gangster, imploring a crowd of people whom he's groomed over the last year with his associates to help him with his desperate last-ditch effort to overturn the results of a lawful election.
Does your client agree with that characterization?
Chris, again, you understand what it's like to be a lawyer in trial, but let's talk about it in the abstract. Imagine that you've been used and abused and left out to dry. What other conclusion would you embrace, right? I mean, it's sickening what's happened to these people who would have otherwise had no business coming to Washington, D.C., and certainly wouldn't have stormed the Capitol in this fashion and behaved in such a lawful and disgusting manner.
I think that's, I have to say, I'm sympathetic to that as a psychological account, even a sort of novelistic one, if I were doing a character study or whatever. But I guess the legal question is, at a legal level, why should that remove the culpability for a set of actions that your client appears to have taken here, again, without getting into the facts, or anyone appears to have taken, which they had to know at some level was wrong, or even if they didn't, they still did?
Chris, again, you've analyzed it correctly. When you have the President of the United States grooming you to believe that the election was stolen, our democracy is at stake, fight like hell, we're never going to concede. It's either you get down to the Capitol and I'll be right there with you, or else an illegitimate president is going to take office. So it's not hard, at least from my perspective, to understand how vulnerable, unsophisticated, politically speaking, people who've been fed this diet of BS would behave in accordance with their president's wishes. And that clearly impacts one's mental state, which, as you well know, is an issue at this trial and every trial.
Has this defense, I mean, there are multiple, obviously there are many defense attorneys representing many different clients. This is the largest investigation the Department of Justice has done. There's been hundreds of them. There's only been a few trials so far, a few bench trials, a few jury trials. Has this line of defense, which I think other attorneys have adopted, have any outcomes been produced by it as of yet?
Chris, I can't say because I don't pay any attention to what anybody else is doing. I have enough problem paying attention to what I'm doing. But I said a year ago when my client was arrested, this can be the only explanation for otherwise law-abiding citizens with no record to convene in Washington, D.C. and storm the holiest of holy spots in our fair capital. There's no other explanation. Zero. They were cajoled, groomed, and directed, period.
Does your client regret going to Washington?
Of course. Who wouldn't regret being in this jackpot? Can you imagine having your whole life turned upside down because you believed in this BS that was spewed from the highest levels of government, this concerted effort day after day where you're fed this crap and you come to believe it, and then all of a sudden your poor beleaguered president claims that the election's illegitimate and there's only one way to stop it, and that's fight like hell.
What is he facing?
You say, what is he facing if he's convicted?
Yes, exactly. Like
regrettably, they're all facing I didn't mean to talk over you. They're all facing felony charges and the potential for years in prison. I mean, you know, it's just unspeakable, the horror that's been inflicted upon these folks. They didn't know better. If you look at the footage, as I know you have, you know, it's not the journalists of the world. It's not the IBM board members of the world, right? It's people who were alone, disenfranchised, looking for something or someone to embrace. Those are the folks that get suckered into this. It's despicable.
I mean, I will say, as a demographic factor, there's a sort of interesting cross-section. You've got, you know, there's CEOs who are in the crowd. There was people who flew there on private jets. There's up and down the class scale of America. So I don't think there's any inoculation against the seduction of doing it along class or education lines. I guess I wonder, how do you mount this defense? And can you, like, call the ex-president? Can you, like, what does the defense look like if it hinges on him being fundamentally the culpable actor here?
Well, you know, I follow the rules as set forth by the judge. And although we made every effort to bring Trump into court, we were, at least so far, unsuccessful. But that's okay because we still have his entire statement videotaped, talking about build the wall and spewing hatred and talking about poor, poor me and how I've been ripped off and our democracy hangs in the balance. Every single dog whistle and buzzword were utilized by Trump and his co-conspirators in order to have the Capitol stormed in this desperate, sickening effort to overturn the results of a lawful election. Is
this a jury trial or a bench trial?
It's a jury trial, Chris.
In Washington, D.C.?
In our capital, correct.
And is that where you usually practice, Sam?
I usually practice in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a local yokel hillbilly lawyer.
And showing up in you will be Washington. When is this trial set?
We're in the middle of it.
Well, I'm curious to see how this all goes down. Sam Szymanski, who is representing a client who was there on the day of the Capitol, thank you so much for coming on the program.